Hi, I'm Ugly Grandma, and I am here to talk about the rest of the books that I read in the month of July. I did a previous video, and I will put the link up here for that, about the first 7 books that I read, and this will be the last 8 books I read. And once I get into these, you're going to see why I was able to read so many books in the month of July. I did remember this time to turn off my AC, so we're doing better in this video already. Just as a reminder, I do rate these books on a scale of 1 to 5. I have 5 criteria that I'm looking for in a book, and those are the initial response of how I felt when I finished reading the book, the character development, plot and structure, writing style, and then rereadability and recommendations. Let's get into the 8 books that I finished reading in July. The first one was The Crash by Frieda McFadden, and I read this one for the Goodreads Chart Toppers Challenge. It was a book that I had on my Kindle, so I read this book on my Kindle. This is a thriller mystery about a pregnant woman that gets into a car accident and is picked up by a Good Samaritan, or who she's hoping is a Good Samaritan, and taken back to his house to stay with him and his wife until the blizzard passes. But things take a very dark turn, and because she has a broken ankle and she's in the basement of this house, she has no way to go and get help. This book had a lot of Stephen King's Misery vibe going on in it. I was a little bit worried it was going to end up like that book. It had some really great plot twists at the end. I gave this 4.5 stars. The next one I read was Laura Ingalls Wilder's By the Shores of Silver Lake. This was a reread for me. I have the collection of the books, but they were actually in storage when I went to read this book. So I did read this on my Kindle. Once I finished this book, that's when we went to storage and found a whole bunch of books I'd had in there for years, and the set of them was in there. This is the 5th book in the series. This book is about the family traveling from Plum Creek, Minnesota to DeSmet, South Dakota. A majority of the book is about their first year in DeSmet. I read these books every year from the time I was in 5th grade until I graduated high school. It's funny, going back and rereading these books as adults, you notice a lot of stuff that you might gloss over as a child or even as a teenager. And I think now that I'm living in Montana, when I was growing up, I lived in Western Washington. Now living in Montana, I have a better understanding of what they're talking about with the scenery and the winter and the things that they went through. I think what I find most fascinating about this particular book is they were one of the first families to stay the winter in DeSmet before all of the settlers started coming through. They talk about how they were the only ones there and what happened the spring after they were there. It's really an interesting read as an adult. The next book I read was a book called Foster Child by Marion, Dane, Bauer. This was definitely a reread for me. This is a book that I had as a preteen and teenager, and one that I read quite a few times growing up, and it's a very short book. It took me like one afternoon to read this. It's a children's book, maybe even considered a young adult book because of the theme of the book. It's about a girl that goes into foster care after her great-grandmother gets placed into the hospital. The things that happen to her there and the unwanted advances of the foster dad and her trying to get out of that situation, and also to help another child that's in that home. I had read this quite a bit as a preteen and teenager, and reading it as an adult, it's a little bit shocking. I think it's because of this book that I really got into reading about children in foster care and the things that have happened to them, why they're there, what they get out of being in a foster home, and what happens to them once they're done in the foster home. There's 2 authors in particular. I've read just about all their books. It's Kathy Glass and Casey Watson. They're both foster moms in the UK, and I absolutely love their books. And I think it's has a lot to do with this one. The next book I read was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This is a book that I heard about on one of the YouTube channels and decided to give it a try. It was available through Kindle Unlimited. It's enemies to lovers, romance, rom-com type of story. It's about a best man and a maid of honor who end up going on the honeymoon because the bride and groom get really sick and are unable to go, and they don't want to waste their honeymoons. I'm not a big romance novel fan, but I gotta say, I really enjoyed this one. I loved the rom-com aspect of it. It was really surprising to me how much I really enjoyed this book. I had a hard time putting it down. I gave this one 3.5 stars. The next book I read was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. And I read this one for a Goodreads Acclaimed Titles Challenge. I had actually had this on my Kindle wish list, and I found it at a local thrift store, and I only paid like $2 for it, which it would have cost me a lot more as a Kindle read. I picked it up and ended up reading it a lot sooner than I planned on for this challenge. This is a contemporary fiction book about a family in an affluent town and how the tenants of the rental house that they own get involved with the family and the things that happen because of being involved with them. Also because of things that are said and done throughout the story cause other issues. I had a little bit of trouble getting into this. It was one of those I picked up, read a little bit, put it back down, picked it up, read it, put it back down. But then I got to a certain point in the book and it was like, oh my gosh, I gotta find out what happens. I enjoyed this book, even though one of the characters, I just wanted to tell her to mind her own business. It was still a really good read. I gave this one 3.5 stars. The next one I read was Catherine House by Elisabeth Thomas. This is a book I think I must have either seen it on Goodreads or it popped up on something. I decided to read it through Kindle Unlimited. I had a lot of hopes for this book. It was a dark academia book. It was about a girl that gets selected to go into an exclusive college where all the students' tuition is paid for by mysterious benefactors. There's something going on in the background that the kids kind of know about, but not really. It just sounded like a really good story, and I was really excited to read it. But I got about 10% into it, and I did something I don't usually do, which is read the reviews, because I was having a really hard time with this book. It just felt like it was going nowhere, and the writing was definitely not my style, because it was one of those where it was like the character ate dinner, the character went to bed, the character took a bath. It just seemed like nothing was happening. I read some of the reviews and found other people felt the same way. I did finish the book. It was a bit of a struggle just because nothing seemed to be happening, and when it did get good and when it seemed like, oh, this is the reason I wanted to read it, it went nowhere. It was really disappointing to me. This is one book that I only gave 1.5 stars to. It's probably one that I should have just DNF'd at some point. The next book I read was Stephen King's Carrie, because I'm on a kick to read all the Stephen King books and try to read them in publication order. This is the very first one. We got this out of storage, and I was a little amused when I got this out of storage because I have written the dates that I read this book. So you can see that I read it in November of '97 and September of '01. That gives you an idea how long I've had this book. I'm tempted to go ahead and write that I read it again and put this year's date in there as well, since I've already written in it. This book is a horror about a misunderstood teenager that has telekinetic powers and what happens when people double-cross her. I'm guessing that probably 90% of the people out there have either read the book, seen the movie, or at least heard about this book, because it being Stephen King's first, it's fairly popular. And I gave this 4.5 stars. The last book I read in the month was another childhood reread for me, and that is The Law of Gravity by Johanna Hurwitz. I actually had to order this book off of Amazon because I had my own copy for years and years and years and gave it away, but this book kept coming back in my mind. I don't know why. It was just one of those that I had reread a lot as a child, and I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to read it again. This is a children's book about a girl she lives in New York City. She spends her summer on a project to try to bring her mother out of their fifth floor apartment, and her mom hasn't left the apartment in over 8 years. Her goal is just to get her mom out of the apartment. While she's feeling lonely because her friends are going away for the summer, she meets this young boy that becomes her friend and shows her parts of New York City that she wouldn't normally have seen. Got a lot of that adventure in it. And I think that's probably why I liked it as a child, because I was stuck at home in a fairly rural community and I didn't have much to do. I had a couple of friends where we would ride and go play in the creek down the road, but most of my time was spent reading. So I think that's why I enjoyed this book, because she has all these different adventures while she's in New York City. That was 8 of the 15 books that I read. Those were the ones that I read in the last half of the month, and because a lot of those were children's books and very short books, I was able to read a lot of other books throughout the month as well, which is why I got to 15. Don't think I'm going to get there in August, but I might be close. We'll see. If you enjoyed this video, please give it that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, do all the good stuff. Leave comments about what books that you're reading now. What books do you plan on reading? Do you have any recommendations on romantic comedies that I can read? Because I do enjoy those. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.